My name is TJ Ruesch, a writer and researcher for a few channels under the Top 5s label, including Cold Case Detective and our newest launch, Footprints of the Frontier. My story dates back to the fall of 2013, but really goes back further to the mid-20th century and the late 1800s. I hail from a small town in the middle of nowhere, right in the heart of Ohio. Nothing much happens in the Buckeye State, outside of your usual Midwest lifestyle. The seasons don't exist, most people stick around from birth to death, but most importantly, you should always expect the unexpected. Because in small towns like London, Ohio, the creepy only gets creepier. As a senior in high school, I was taking a video production class with a few of my friends. While most of our assignments revolved around the school's student-run news show, my friends and I were always interested in alternative programming. That is to say, we wanted to tell stories and create short films, not report on what was for lunch on Fridays or what color socks the principal was wearing. When October came along and school spirit shifted towards Halloween festivities, my friends and I decided we wanted to make a short film based on an old London city school's myth, to fully grab our viewers' attention and to give a little scare to the more gullible kids in class. Thus, we turned our attention to the oft-told folktale of Claire. Claire was rumored to be a girl and London junior high school student from the 1940s or 1950s. It was never really clarified. According to the myth, Claire was bullied so relentlessly she couldn't bear to go on living in London, Ohio, or attending classes at London Junior High for that matter. Without the resources of the modern age, or a trustworthy adult in the cold, cramped classrooms to help her, Claire supposedly went down into the basement levels of the old school building, where the girls' locker room sat at the end of the hallway, right next to an old boiler room. She brought with her a piece of old rope, stood up on one of the old wooden benches encasing the locker room, and tied it to the sturdiest pipe jutting out from the half-finished ceiling. Claire then committed suicide, free from the torment and horrifying cruelty beset upon her by her unrelenting classmates. You see, London, Ohio is a town that prides itself on history, and while the decades went on and new school buildings were constructed, the old ones remained there on the corner of First and Walnut Street. In fact, they were used all the way up until the early 2010s. Despite no air conditioning, asbestos-filled walls, and a fair share of safety hazards, we walked into those doors for 3 years as junior high students, which, of course, only fueled the folklore. While the rumors ran aplenty during my time at the old London Junior High School, we never saw or heard much paranormal activity, let alone the ghost of Claire. Of course, we always wanted to blame it on the bright lights and the constant stream of activity. No spirit wanted any part of noisy, obnoxious middle schoolers pestering their eternal slumber. However, we were sure that when the sun set over Madison Lake and the lights went off in the 19th century school building, the supernatural would come out to play. Fast forward a few years, and my friends and I finally got our chance to prove the mythos real. After receiving approval from the London Parks and Recreation Department, who were in charge of operations at the now defunct London Junior High School turned condemned community building, we were allowed a few unsupervised nights of exploration in that old, potentially cursed brick structure. We walked into that school building with all the confidence in the world. Our plan was to shoot a script detailing 3 boys who look for the ghost of Claire, inspired by the folktale itself, in the style of the Blair Witch Project and other first-person point-of-view horror films. It didn't take long before we realized it wasn't the brightest idea. On the second night of filming, we were shooting on the second floor, where the old library still sat, covered in cobwebs and dust. Old textbooks stacked like gargoyles everywhere you stepped. We kept thinking someone, or something, was behind us, but no matter how many creaky classrooms we cleared, nothing popped out of the dark. That is, until somebody did. We were standing by the lockers, ready to shoot the next scene, when a shadowy figure standing at around 6 feet jumped from the shadows, screaming loud enough to echo off the 120-year-old rafters. We all almost died of shock before we realized the shadowy figure wasn't some criminal hiding in the building or a poltergeist playing tricks on his victims. Rather, it was just one of the Parks and Rec employees who knew that we would be there that night and knew that he could scare us like never before. Oh, was he right? And we wished that was all too. The next night, the third and final day of filming, we were tackling the most pivotal scene in which the protagonist had to face the girls' locker room in the basement, where Claire was said to have taken her final breath. The stage was set perfectly too. A few weeks prior, a couple of pranksters broke into the old middle school and sprayed multiple fire extinguishers across the basement floors. It left a thick layer of dust over everything in sight and made it look like the building truly hadn't been open since Claire's demise. As our leading man, Chase, walked into that locker room, words don't do justice for how cold he and the rest of us felt. Playing it off as just the chilly autumnal weather taking hold of central Ohio, we then realized one of the shower heads in the back was leaking. Drip, drip, drip. One of us, and I can't remember who, walked over and tried twisting the water valve to the off position in all of the shower stalls. For a moment, all was quiet, until we started filming. Drip, drip, drip. At this point, we knew we weren't alone, and expedited the filming process as best as we could. Our leading man, Chase, who was at this point a shell of himself after spending the most time in the locker room, had to film a scene where he hyperventilated into the handheld camera while saying goodbye as the ghost of Claire was coming to drag him away. The terror in his eyes was real. His shaky breaths were real. The way he stood there in that dark and dreary locker room, paralyzed with fear, was real. We couldn't finish soon enough. For the last shot of the film, we wanted to capture our leading actress walking down the hallway as the ghost of Claire, humming the old Jimmy Davis song, "You Are My Sunshine," a lullaby that quickly becomes an unsettling nightmare when sung in a minor key in the basement of a haunted building over a century old. Just before she started singing, however, another voice from around the corner started to hum. I screamed at everyone to be quiet, yet the humming persisted. I gathered everyone in the crew to stand at the center of the hallway, watching all of their mouths to make sure no one was joking around. The humming persisted. This was the final straw. We filmed the last shot in one take and booked it out of the building faster than the lightning during a mid-October thunderstorm. We stood in the parking lot and looked upon the towering remnants of London Junior High School with equal parts relief and horror. Never again would we tempt the restless spirit of Claire, and whomever was left in little old London, Ohio. The myth might have been just that, a myth. But the six of us who were in that building that night knew we were lucky to make it out of there with a story to tell and a lesson to share with all. Do not mess with the supernatural of a small town.